Guys, welcome to Houdini 17.5 fern hair grooming tutorial. Today we're going to be using this gorilla slash Kong kind of model to demonstrate how to do a correct groom on a 3D model. I was going to use like an Alembic or an FBX with some motion capture, but trying to record a tutorial with all this amount of processing power, my computer just wasn't liking it, so unfortunately it's just a static model. It's nice to see when the character does actually move with fur, because obviously certain areas around the arms and the shoulders and stuff, you can really see if you've painted the weights correctly and how it's going to look when it's in a production. So yeah, just going to go through the basics of how to do a correct fur groom. So firstly, obviously get your 3D model into the scene. After that, if you want to import a guide groom, and there's a number of ways you can connect this to the 3D model. You can either put it in the SOP path, or you can just literally plug it in. And I think, just to make it more simple, literally doing it as a chain in my head just makes a lot more sense. So yeah, we'll get that guide groom in there, and that's where the majority of the grooming is going to be done. But I'm going to add a guide deform just below the guide groom. It basically, I'm not 100% sure what it does, but it seems to make the groom look more realistic, not all the furs. You can't really see it at the minute, but basically it kind of puts a bend on the curve of the hairs. It's really difficult to see, but in the final product it does make a lot of a difference. So once you've done that, go inside of the guide groom, and you're going to be brought into this menu here, and what you're going to want to put is another groom. I think it's another guide groom. It is another guide groom, so we'll put that in the middle so it connects all three, technically all six together, and now you get the basically the guide groom. This is where you're going to be doing all of the grooming and getting the gorilla to look correct. Now I've decided to cover it in grooms, and what we're probably going to do is just delete the hairs and the grooms around the face, because that's, if we just quickly have a look at this picture, as you can see, the face is just the main area that doesn't have hair. You could go for the fingers, but then again, even the fingers have hair on the back of them, so it's one of those where it's really down to you on what your artistic decisions are. Obviously this is quite a good model here, and just a good reference. Obviously the hair's quite coned back and quite tall, the arms are quite baggy and long, then the back's quite thin and short hair, and as you can see, like the legs and the arms are similar, but the legs are more baggy at the bottom, whereas the hands go quite short and quite thin hair towards the hands. So it's quite a complicated one doing gorillas, but as I said, the face is the main area that we do need to delete first. So let's go into doing that, and what you're going to want to do is select the cut tool, and I think the best way to probably do it is if we can get below the chin, about there. I'm trying to do it so it's parallel, but it doesn't really matter at this point, because obviously we're going to be able to add grooms if we do delete too many. So if we just go for something like that and swipe across, as you can see, it does take a little bit of time with my computer, but that's done pretty well there. It's kind of difficult to see. Let me just do that so we can see the guide grooms a little bit better. It's kind of taken a little bit off the neck area here, so maybe we'll try that again and see if we can get a better cut. So there we go, we've done that, and as you can see, we do have a bit of an issue because I've basically covered the 3D model. It's basically put guide grooms inside of the mouth area. You can see it's kind of difficult to show, but basically what I'm going to have to do, it doesn't really matter because you're probably not going to see these bits, but just for processing power, if we just go inside of the head and delete these guides, it just makes everything run a little bit smoothly, and you can actually see your groom look correctly. But yeah, it's one of those where you can go, if you really wanted to, you could literally paint the entire gorilla other than the areas that you want the hairs, then put the guide grooms onto the 3D model, But I think this just makes a lot more sense, and obviously it doesn't take too long just to delete these few hairs around the mouth. Obviously you don't want a hairy tongue. So once you've deleted as much as you can around the areas that you don't want the fur, obviously it's really down to you on a guide, on a groom, how much of work you want to do. If it's only for a few seconds of a scene, then it's not that important, because I don't think anyone's really going to see it. Yeah, I'm probably going to take a lot longer when I properly groom this 3D model, because there are a lot of complexities to it. But just for this quick tutorial, but yeah, just deleting areas, obviously like the ears, just getting rid of those guide grooms and stuff like that. So yeah, now that we've done that, I think the next step is probably to add back some of the hairs that we don't that we just deleted, because at the minute he's looking a bit bold up here. We do need to, if you look, the hairs literally go up to the top of the eyes, basically where the eyebrows are, and it has this kind of like comb back. There's like the bit of hair here, and then it combs back. So if we can try and replicate, that's probably more realistic for something like what I'm going to be doing. So there we go. Now that we've added those back, that's probably, I don't know, do I need to add around the ears, like almost the cheek area? Let me just quickly check. It does seem like, yeah, it does seem they do have hairs pretty much up to the nose. So we're going to have to literally just cover this area with hairs on the cheek, just up to the nose. It's a little bit difficult because of the shape of the mouth. So I'm just adding the guides back to his cheek kind of area, as you can see on the reference. It literally goes around the eyes, around the nose, and around the mouth. So yeah, maybe we cut off a little bit too much, but it's really down to you what kind of groom you want to go for. As you can see, these gorillas very different in literally pretty much every picture. There's a different looking one. So yeah, it's really down to you, but if we can get something as close as possible, then that's good, of course. So yeah, we'll just add back these guides to the face. I may need to cut some actually from just that ear area there, just on the lobe, and that should do that. Maybe a bit on the top of the ear as well. But as I said, it's really down to you how much of a guide, how much of a groom you want to do, and how much time you've got to do it, because you could sit here for years and do a properly accurate guide groom, or you can just get the job done in a reasonable amount of time. So once you've done with the guide, it's kind of difficult to see because of the guides inside the mouth, where you've actually put the ones on the chin and around the mouth area. So yeah, for the time being, this should do the job, because obviously it's just a tutorial. We're just going to show you the basics of grooming. So also, as I said, you need to consider like areas like the hands, for example. I could delete a bit here on the palm of the hand, because they do have quite clean cut areas. I think nothing more than that really, because I don't know, I might just keep it there, to be honest, because I can always just shorten the length of the hair to a short amount, and then when it comes to actually like brushing the hair, it's just a lot more of a simple process. So I think we'll leave that for the time being. I could do the bottom of the feet, but realistically I don't think we're going to see the bottom of the feet, so it's really down to you. As you can see, the hands, literally the fur does go all the way around the hands, but then the palms, if we can just put palm in there, it does have pretty much human-like hands. So it's one of those where it's how much of the audience is going to see. But as you can see, like the backs of the hands, I could delete the hair, to be honest. I think I should probably do that just to make it as realistic as possible. But we will delete the furs on the bottom of the feet, the guides on the bottom of the feet. Sorry, I keep getting guides and furs mixed up, but they do look like furs, so that's why I say it. So if we just delete areas on the bottom of the feet, it'll also help with your render times as well. If you've got less hairs to obviously do, obviously it's not going to make a massive difference, but just by doing Control Z, if you do make any errors, we'll put those guides back. So I will do the bit of the hand, but not all of it, because it is a closed fist. Obviously these fingers should be covered in fur, but I'll just do this quick bit here. I just hope it hasn't deleted anything. It's kind of deleted off the thumb there, so let me just go back and get the brush to the right size and then do the job properly. It is very difficult to see because obviously you can see through both sides of the 3D model if you've actually done it right, but something like that, as you can see, it's just deleted those bit of hairs there. And if we do the same with the other hand, so now we've put the guide grooms in the correct places and deleted the ones that we don't need, we're going to start to brush this hair back and create almost his comb back kind of hairstyle. As I said, it's one of those where there's no right and wrong with a groom, but if you can try and get it looking as realistic as possible, that obviously helps, if that's what you're going for. It's mainly down to getting these in the correct kind of flow. You don't want it to go, you don't want it to look unnatural, so it's really down to you how much time you spend on this. So with the hair, if we go for like a kind of peak, I think this is the perfect example really. I'm not going to go for this bit of hair here, but if we just get this like groom and kind of a mane to the gorilla, then that'll be kind of good. So I'm trying to get it as central as possible, because obviously we don't want to have a comb over of any sort. It is quite a difficult decision process on where you want the hairs to start falling and where you want them to go up. So you don't want it to have like almost a gap here, which we kind of have at the minute. So yeah, we'll go for something like that, I think. If we just move these hairs down. Now, the majority of the back and I think I'm just literally going to go for one big swipe down on the back, just because we just basically need these hairs at the minute. They're stood up on their ends, and we kind of need them to lie down. We could do a guide initialize, but I think that does mess up with what I've done at the hair at the top. I think the best way to come out completely of the guide groom and have a look, obviously because I've deleted those hairs around the face, it does look a bit thin where the gap does go, but I do like the way that the mane is starting to go up. Maybe we do need a bit of length with that though, and if we change this to extend, we can basically make this longer. So I think we kind of need to extend these hairs just on the head, just to make it look a little bit better, but nothing. The problem is when you extend hairs, it literally picks where you put the first bit, so you need to do it that. You basically need to click. If you just do that, it will extend just those hairs there. So you basically have to click all over this head. I could actually just do it in one big click, actually, I think, because then obviously it will be quite even. There we go, something like that, just to give it a bit of length. But you do need a slight little swing of the mouse, but it's really small strokes just to get the correct amount of length you want. Now if you just brush that back, now it's getting a bit more like it is in real life. As you can see, I'm just going to do the body now and kind of go for broad strokes, just because it is kind of an area where you don't need as much detail, but basically we just need to relax these hairs, because at the minute they're kind of stood up on their end. As you can see, it kind of goes around the foot, but you do need to do this on both the front and the back of the gorilla. In this way you can basically see the hairs better on the render view. If I just quickly, if you had a look at it now, you'd see the hairs on his legs because they're combed down, but on his back they're just stood up. So we do need to brush these down with a big brush, and obviously if you're doing this in a correct groom, you're going to want to spend quite a bit of time just to make sure you get all these hairs pointing in the right direction. If we just do something like that, if we get around each side, give it a nice even brush, and So now that we've brushed around the gorilla, we may need to do a bit on the back as well. I think just on the back of the head, just to brush it down. But I do kind of want that mane to point up, but I don't want him to have like almost like a bald patch here because of a comb over. And that's what you've got to kind of work with, and maybe even like just put in guide grooms, just further guide grooms that both go straight down like these and straight up, so you've got a combination of the two. Something like that might be what's best to do. In terms of this head, I'm pretty happy with how it looks. It's one of those things where it's going to be, once you have a look in the render view, where you can really see if it's worked or not. But yeah, something like this should do the job, but I kind of want it to push back, not a lot, but a little bit, and I think that's a little bit too much. Something like that, I think, just to give it a bit of a brush action to it. So you may need to do areas like around the neck, which are going to be quite important, because obviously when you have motion on this 3D model, we may need to put some hairs here. As you can see, there's a bit of a patch, but it's all kind of patchwork, basically just putting things where they should be and what kind of direction they should be going. So it is quite... So now that we have all the hairs pointing in the right direction, we may... It is one of those where you're not really going to see if it's worked or not until you start to render it. And we may actually need to... I think I've forgotten to do like the inside of the legs kind of area, where you're going to see that when it does start to move its legs and stuff like that. So just quickly brush these down. So I think if we go for the adjust length on the arms, this should do the trick in terms of almost thicken it up. As you can see, it's kind of difficult to show, but it does get thicker with the adjust length tool, as long as you stroke it along the length of the arms. We just want it to get a nice thickness around. We could have probably done with the adjust length on the head. That might be better than just extending individual hairs. Let me just quickly have a look. But it's one of those where you need the right tool for the right job. Maybe a smooth tool over here, just to smooth these hairs a bit more, because obviously it's going to be quite a smooth motion with the hairs. You can quite clearly see there that this arm is a lot thinner in hairs than this arm, and what you want is basically an even amount of hairs, because you don't want loads of hairs on one arm and then none on the other. So I think that will do for now on that arm. Obviously we can go back and do further work, but just for this tutorial we'll try and go through this as quickly as possible. I may do the legs as well, because the legs do have quite a bit. I think it's mainly the body area where you've got thin hair. Head, obviously you've got a completely clean nose, eyes and mouth. So if we just quickly brush these arms down. There we go. The only thing about this is the deletion of the hairs on the hand that we did do earlier. It's not bad actually, because now you've got almost the hairs. It's kind of difficult because I'm in a fist pose to correctly, if we just brush these around the fingers a bit better, just so it doesn't just literally sit off the edge. That's a bit too much there. Yeah, we don't want any like sticking out fur. So if you can just comb, it's so difficult though because of the part on the wrist and then the fingers part. I kind of want it to fall naturally around, which is quite difficult to do, but something like that just looks a bit more natural than what it was before. If we just look at that now compared to maybe a bit on that finger. So if we look for something like that compared to what it's on the other hand, you can see it's kind of just, all the hairs have just gone to the end, so we do need to look at things like this, and even on the feet as well, where you've got the ends of the animal. Obviously we've done it on the head area, but it's kind of this area around the thumb, because of the way the thumb is going across. You've got hairs going diagonally across the fingers, then you've got hairs going this way, then you've got hairs going that way, so it's so there's no right and wrong. That's the good thing about a groom, but obviously there is a correct looking groom and there's a bad looking groom, so you do need to make sure you get all these hairs shooting in the right direction, and maybe even going for like a groom just on the back of the palm of the hand, just to give it a bit more direction, something like that potentially. That looks much better than what it was before, and I'll still do that on this hand, because the hands are not as hairy. They're still hairy, but they're not as thick, and as you can see, as we brush the back of the hand, it pushes more hairs towards that area, and then we just comb them back inside. So there we go. Now that we've done that, we could go into the feet area, just have a look at what they're looking like, but it's kind of okay on the feet because they are going to be moving, there's going to be gravity and stuff like that, but if we can just slightly brush it towards the toe. I don't want it though where it's going to be sticking out, so we do need to brush them down as well. If we look back at the picture, have we got one with legs? The legs are still quite long compared to the back, for example. The legs are, if you look there on the thigh, the thigh's got a lot of excess hair, so if we want to just go back to the adjust length and give these legs a bit of hair, we may want to extend the hairs actually on the arms just to give them that bushiness, but as I said, it is kind of difficult with the extend tool to get the correct length on all the hairs. It's one of those where you don't want it looking too different to what the body looks like, but you do obviously want a bit of length, and as you can see, that's only done one side of the arm. Now to do it on the other side and hopefully get it as even as possible. I think we go for something like that with the arms. I think that looks much more like they do in this picture. As you can see, it's kind of, you know, it's not cleanly brushed on the arms, it's kind of rough, like these. So if we just go back to the extend tool, because obviously we've already done the brushing and the adjustment length, extending these hairs are basically just making them longer, because they've already been brushed basically in this direction, and by extending them in this direction, that's basically brushing them as well. So yeah, it doesn't really matter if this bit's even, because obviously that's kind of what they look like in real life. They're very uneven hair on the arms. So there we go. If we go something like that, as you can see, you can really start to see it looking very similar to how it should look in real life. I think in terms of the groom, I'm kind of happy with where it is in terms of, for this tutorial, just showing you the, you know, deleting grooms and making them longer and all that stuff. I think you've got a good understanding now of how to correctly groom. So we'll go into the we'll go back out of this guide groom, and as you can see, when you do exit, it does kind of highlight these areas that I've kind of done poorly, like around the face, that could be a lot better, because obviously I've added these grooms individually. But maybe going for a bit of a menacing looking gorilla might be better. So yeah, something like that for the groom. I'm not too sure if I need to do something. Yeah, those feet look a bit poor. Yeah, I need to basically brush those hairs off the bottom of the feet, so let me just go back and quickly do that. So now that we've done the groom on the guides, we're going to add a hair generate and move into looking at the density of the hair and the correct colouring, of course. As you can see, you can't really see it, but if we just turn these off, this is basically the hair of the gorilla, and maybe it's a little bit too thin, but obviously we can change that in these density options here. So if we, because I'm doing a tutorial, I don't want to make this basically crash, so I'm just going to quickly save before we do anything. I think if I go for something like 10,000, which is still a lot, but you're aiming for something around 30 to 40,000 to make it look as best as possible. As you can see, that's made the hairs look much better, but even still, you know, on this chest area it could be a bit thicker, but just for this tutorial, probably not gonna try and blow the computer up. But as you can see, the errors in my face are very bad indeed, and to delete these errors, it's a process that I kind of don't want to do right now because it might break the computer, for example. So if we just turn these off and go back into, as you can see, like, the difference between the guide grooms and the hairs is massive, because obviously we've only got, how many is it, 1,000? Yeah, we've only got 1,000 of these guides. Once you add 10,000 of the hairs, it does start to add hairs where they shouldn't be, but at the same time places where they should. Like, I'm not too sure why it's not put the hairs here. I'm a bit confused at that, to be honest. But as I said, we can go back, we can add more. I'd say this side's slightly better, but maybe going for something just to have a look at it is better than nothing. Maybe if we just increase this to 15,000, it will start to add those hairs around the face. I think if we ignore the face area for now, I'm pretty happy with how the arms look, especially. I think the arms look very accurate to how they should be, and the only issue is because I've got so much density, it is starting my computer to go a bit slow, so I'm just going to decrease this. As I said, it's one of those where it's so difficult to demonstrate. So if we just go back into here, and if we can delete those hairs around the mouth, then that will just make things look a lot better. But it's kind of difficult because you can't actually go inside of the mouth. If I just go inside the mouth, the cut tool just disappears sometimes, so I'm kind of stuck on the edge of the mouth. And obviously now that we've got the hair generate in, it is taking a lot longer to delete those hairs. But yeah, we'll go for this for now. We have this to form back. There we go. Cool. So now that we've got the hair gen in, we change the density. We could even change the length, actually. So if we want to change the length of the hair, you're going to want to go into the guides and change it here. So if we go, just to make it a little bit bigger, not by too much though, if we go to 0.7, that just basically starts to grow the length of the hair ever so slightly. And if we change the thickness of the hair, if we just double that up to 0.02, you can see a massive difference straight away. It's really down to the settings. You know, the groom helps, but then I'm trying to get the hairs around the cheek area basically to grow, which I don't think is working at the minute, which is a bit of a shame, but we seem to have a lot of hairs in the mouth, which we definitely don't want on the final product. But this is, you know, it's highlighting the issues that may arise. Now, to change the colour of your hair gen, you're going to want to go into the material palette and add a hair shader in there, and this is basically going to be your colour. So gorillas generally are a grey black kind of colour. So if we go, I don't want fully black. If we look at the pictures, you can see I want this kind of shade, and almost that kind of almost a bluey dark grey. So if we add a bit of blue to it, So if we go for something like that, I think, on the root colour, and then tip colour is also important, and probably going for something of a similar colour, maybe like that. I think that should do nicely. So now that we've got the colours that we want, and we can obviously change these once we add them, because you know, it's all down to your artistic interpretation. You're going to want to add the material which we named Kong onto him, and as you can see straight away, that potentially is a bit too dark, but it's, you know, it's down to your lighting as well. That's another big factor in the scene. If we just quickly have a look at what that looks like in the render view, we'll be able to see what the colours look like, and maybe with this environment light it might not 100% like it. So I'm not going to render this out for too long, just because I don't want my computer to explode. But yeah, basically I'm kind of happy with that kind of shade, you know, that dark grey, black colour, maybe even going a bit darker is what we need to do. Something around there, maybe even the tip colour a bit darker as well, just something like that, because your lighting's going to bring it up. Obviously I've got that light in there at the minute. If we go for a directional light, you can start to see, so if we go for something like that in terms of lighting, so if we have a look at it now with the distant light in the scene, this just basically helps to highlight what the hairs will look like in the dark and what they'll look like with light. Obviously the environment light is kind of difficult to demonstrate. As you can see, the density, because obviously I'm doing a tutorial, it's very difficult to actually get the groom to what kind of stage I want it to be at, but you know, we're at a pretty good stage. Maybe the hairs could be a lot thicker on the head. As you can see, they do look quite thin, you can almost see through the gorilla. I'm just thinking if I can add, so if we just leave that there for that render with the distant light, as you can see, like, you can definitely see that the density of the fur is very low. We do need to, I don't want to test it though, because I just know it's going to break my computer, but if we put this density up to 30 or 40,000, you're going to see a much better product. And also putting this up to even that'll just make a massive difference to what the end product looks like. So, you know, if we go, I don't know, do I test it? Let's just save it, and if it does crash, we can always come back and try again. But we do need this density much higher. As you can see, the bar's literally towards the bottom at the minute. So if we go for, let's go for 30,000. We'll take a moment just to grow all those new hairs, but basically it just makes things look a lot better. I'm also going to add, because gorillas are generally black/grey underneath, if we just add a quick surface just to cover the areas, just to know what the furs will look like. So I managed to get this skin onto the Kong. It's you know, it's just a basic one, just with the mouth and eyes, just to see what it will look like with the fur on, which is probably a good idea, because obviously compared to the white/bright grey material that it was before, the hairs might look completely different now that they're on a black skin. So if we just rotate this around a little bit and have a look in the render view, it may take a while to do, and it may cause my recording software to crash, but hopefully that's not the case. So just generating the scene now. I didn't actually realise there's like a secondary reflection, and that's probably what we're going to see here with those white. I thought it was the lighting, but it's clearly not. If we just add an environment light to the scene quickly and go back to the render view, you can clearly see it's something to do with the shader. So now that we've changed that secondary reflection, we're starting to see what we're kind of looking for. We're still seeing that the fur's not quite long enough. You know, you kind of need these. If you just look back at the pictures, you can see. You're obviously not going to see the final product here in the render view, and maybe going closer to like individual hairs might be better off to show off what it really looks like if we go somewhere around this arm area. Maybe not that close, but yeah, my computer's starting to slow down a little bit. But as you can see, it's what I want it to look like, but it's very difficult to know until you've literally rendered out the fur, what the final product is going to look like with colouring, with lighting and everything. So if we just see here, we can see the hairs, like individual hairs there on the horizon of the arm, and that's what you want to see. Obviously we've only done like 2%, so you're not going to get a proper look at it until even if I fully render it out in here, it's not going to look what it looks like as a final product. It might be better with a thickness of a lower amount, just to show almost the hairs, because obviously the thickness of the hairs are thinner. You're going to be able to see the hairs better. If you make the thickness thicker, it almost makes it kind of blocky looking, the hairs. So yeah, it's one of those where you're never really finished with the groom until you are 100% happy with it. So yeah, I've just tried to have a look without the deform node in there, just to have a look at how it looks now in terms of the hairs. I think I've managed to add the hairs that we didn't add before. As you can see where basically I've not put guide grooms, and where obviously the ones in the face are still around. So if I just quickly have a look at the errors here, obviously it's starting to get very slow now that we're starting to render out all these hairs and increase the density and stuff. Yeah, we can also look at, you know, inside of this there are so many things which help to, if we just add white hairs and guard hairs, and if we look at the reflection of it, if we increase that up to like 9, you can start to see some shine on those hairs. So I've just re-added the deform, and maybe that was stopping those hairs being grown on the face. So I've literally just added it back in between the guide groom and the hair gen, and it seems to have basically put the hairs which we did have on the cheek, and you can kind of see where I've done a bit of a bodge job in between the head, like the hair on his head and the hair on his cheek. There's kind of a gap here. But yeah, my Houdini's starting to get quite slow, so we may need to wrap up this tutorial here, which is pretty much done at this point. You know, this is the process you've got to go through, making sure you've got this guide groom here, making sure you get the correct amount, you know, making sure you delete the grooms inside of its head and stuff like that. That's really, really important. But yeah, we've pretty much got to where we need to be. If we can maybe have a look at the gorilla, that'd be great. And if you just put your mouse over the hairs, you can see basically inside of the eyeballs it's put hairs, and when obviously I've increased the density, those hairs that are unseeable on the guides, when they become hairs, it's very, very easy to see that it kind of has eyelashes, but not very good ones. But yeah, I think we're going to probably wrap up this tutorial here. I think that's pretty much all I need to show you for hair generation and grooming. If we just try and render this out, just have a look at what the I'm kind of concerned at how the head looks really. As you can see with the hair, it does look much better now that we've got the correct areas, you know, on those cheeks. It just looks a little bit more accurate to something like this. Obviously I've not quite got the maybe if I increase the IOR on here, we just get the bit of shininess on the face that we kind of need, just to give it that almost skin looking factor to it. So I think we've pretty much covered all bases in terms of the hair grooming, in my opinion, and how to do it. Obviously you've got all these tools here that you can go through, and you can really, you know, we could have parted the hair in certain areas, but you don't really part the hair on a gorilla. You could clump the hair in certain areas, maybe clump it in, I don't know, the backside and stuff like that, but yeah, planting the guides, making sure all the guides are in the correct places, the number one most important thing, because obviously the issues that I've had here aren't the best. You know, we could do with doing this taking a bit longer, but it's just one of those where doing a tutorial on hair grooming is very difficult indeed, and that's probably why there aren't that many. So yeah, hopefully you guys find this tutorial very useful, and if you have any questions, leave a comment down below, and see you soon. Bye.